was gonna say. I would marry the
How's the dog?
Can we see the dog?
The dog is beautiful. What, you didn't see you don't know about my dog?
That's not
All right.
now. What's his name?
Dog's name is Ryder. I'm gonna bring up
Ryder.
I'm gonna bring up Ryder. Right. I'm gonna be a goofy.
Nice Jewish name.
Goofy. It was the name that it came with. We were gonna change it, and then we decided.
It's the name he came with.
I didn't come up with it.
He'll get it. Time.
I didn't come up with the name. Somebody named the dog Ryder.
Oh, that's what happened with my dog.
And
Mine too.
It wasn't up to me. I didn't really weigh in on. I didn't weigh in on it, but I don't know if we're going to be able to bring Ryder to the pet service because you're not supposed to have them out, I guess, with other dogs for a while.
Yeah,
Now it is a doodle, golden doodle.
Social distancing, yeah.
Just to forewarn, because we have a doodle. They like to hop.
This dog does hop, but is not ridiculous. You know, it's very chill, which is why I like this dog enough to have it in my house. I didn't say anything more than that. Hello? Can you bring up Ryder?
You bring up Ryder,
Class wants to
please.
see Ryder. It is a cute dog. I'm not gonna lie.
Very cute.
I'm not going to paint it any different than it is. It's a cute dog.
Are we going to be able to social distance on Saturday?
What was that?
Are we going to be able to social distance on Saturday?
Yeah, no problem. And we have a special guest, as you saw coming. We have a guy, this really neat rescue called Raise Hope Rescue, which helps put dogs with veterans. Here, this is the dog.
Hi,
Ryder.
Ryder.
Yeah, dog Ryder. It's Ryder. That looks like the dog from a movie. It's a movie dog. That's a dog.
Adorable.
We're very happy with Ryder is making everybody happy, especially Shira. That's why we have Ryder. And even Tracy likes Ryder. Tracy loves it. Tracy
Even Rabbi Mark likes Ryder.
I said I like Ryder. I like dogs. I love dogs. I just don't want one. Anyways,
Jeff, I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you.
Jeff had a wonderful birthday present
That's right.
the other day. He got to see the Dodgers win on his birthday. So congratulations.
Yay.
And Francine Van Scoyk is not on today because she has a previous commitment. She's going to watch later, but she was watching very intently as her son, Robert, as you all know, is the batting coach for the Dodgers. So he was very concerned. Everyone was very concerned about their lack of batting. So yes, when you see this later, we recognize that you are also very vested in the Dodgers, probably again, because it directly affects your family. But anyways, they did well in the end. So today, actually, I'm going to share up this what we're reading today. I think we're going to finish with the brothers today. It's very interesting. So the last section that we're going to read today. And I have to end probably maybe a little bit early because I have a funeral, unfortunately, at Hillside, which you never know how long it takes to get to Hillside. But it's a wonderful long life, 102 years old. Carolyn Heitman's mother, May, passed away, unfortunately, but we're going to remember and honor her. She's 102. She was born in Los Angeles in 1917. She's almost 103. In December, she would have been 103. She lived through like the history of Jewish Los Angeles, born in Boyle Heights, and kind of had that amazing life. So we're gonna honor her and talk about her life. But it's really like a life that mirrored the history of LA. But anyways, today we're going to finish the sons of Jacob, their final words. We're in the home stretch. We're in the last about three or four, like three, the last three testaments from this testament of the 12 patriarchs. And so we're going to finish with that today. And interestingly, the the last section that we're gonna read next week, and probably over 2 weeks, is interesting because it's been included with the Genesis text, but it's not really Genesis, in the sense that it's not anywhere near Genesis in the Bible. And that is the book of Job. So we're actually going to look at the Midrash on the book of Job. So if anybody wants to, in the next few days or whatever, next week, if you want to go over Job and read the story and familiarize yourself with the story of Job, it might help you understand the Midrash a little bit better, because that's what we're going to read next week, and probably again the week after. We're going to read about Job. And the reason that he's placed here in the Midrash, in this collection of Midrash, is because according to kind of the rabbinic calculations, he lived during the time of the patriarchs. And so he's included with them because this collection kind of follows a chronological placement of the individuals and the events as they are reflected in the Bible. And so Job is here instead of kind of where it is in the biblical corpus, in the collection of Bible books. Job is in the Ketuvim, is in the last section, and is read not really for any holidays, but is not anywhere near the book of Genesis in the order of the books. So we're going to look at Job. We haven't looked at the Midrash on Job. It's obviously a very interesting, puzzling book on its own, and therefore the Midrash is even either more puzzling or helps us understand some of those puzzling things. So we're going to take a look today at the last lines of the last sections, the last blessings of the sons of Jacob, who all seem to, at least according to the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, live to be about 125. All of them, as we've read, are also buried back in Hebron in the burial plot of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their wives, with the exception of Rachel. But we don't know that they're buried there, and actually contradictory to that, we have other places in Israel that are, according to tradition, burial places for these other people, like Dan and Naphtali and Gad, that these people are buried not in the cave of Machpelah, not in Hebron. So last week we finished up with Naphtali. We read Dan and Naphtali, the two sons of Bilhah, and what they have to say. So today we're going to read about Zilpah's sons. The 9th and 10th sons are Gad and Asher, and these are also sons of concubines. And as sons of concubines, they are they're maybe relegated to a different level than the other sons. And you got that a little bit with the Dan and Naphtali, who are the sons of Bilhah. Now you'll see this with the sons of Zilpah. So keep that in mind, that the Torah doesn't say a lot about these people. There's speculation about why that is, and maybe the fact that these were tribes that were less connected historically with the Jewish people. I mean, there's a lot of theories about it. We don't know, and it's really speculation. The bottom line is we don't hear them say a lot in the Torah. So therefore, when we have Midrash, especially like these collections from the pseudepigrapha, which wasn't even kept by traditional Jewish rabbinic sources, it's really interesting. And so that's what we've been looking at the last few weeks. So Rosemary, if you want to, if you take us through the son of Zilpah, known as Gad. And again, it's really pronounced God in Hebrew, by the way, but we don't usually say God because it sounds like
Confusing.
God. It's not. But Gad, or
Yeah.
God,
Okay.
in Hebrew means fortunate. It means lucky, if you will. So let's take a look.
God's hatred. In the 125th year of his life, Gad assembled his sons, and he spoke to them. I am the 9th son of Jacob, and I was a valiant shepherd of the flocks. I guarded the herds, and when a lion or any other wild beast approached, I pursued it, gripped it by the foot, flung it a stone's throw from me, and killed it thus. Once, for a space of 30 days, Joseph tended the flocks with us. And when he returned to our father, he told him that the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah slaughtered the best of the herds and used the flesh without knowledge of Reuben and Judah. He had seen me snatch a lamb out of the jaws of a bear, kill the bear, and slaughter the lamb, for it was too badly injured to live. I was wroth with Joseph for his tale-bearing until he was sold into Egypt. I would neither look upon him nor hear anything about him, for to our very faces he blamed us because we had eaten the lamb without seeking the permission of Judah first. And whatever Joseph told our father, he believed.
So let's pause right there. So this Midrash has a theme, which is that God, as one of the sons of the concubines, is not is even more disconnected from Joseph and dislikes him more. There's a couple of traditions here that we see. One of them is that the sons of Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali, might have been, according to some traditions, closer with Joseph than the sons of Zilpah, because Bilhah is Rachel's concubine and is Rachel's helper, if you will. Maybe even her half sister. There's different traditions about it, but the bottom line is that of the sons that really didn't like Joseph, that maybe the sons of Zilpah were like the ones that were least concerned with him, or maybe, to put it in a different way, hated him the most. It's hard to know. And again, there is a line in the Torah that the rabbis hang this on in the commentary. Again, this was not in Torah, but this was in the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, written at around the same time. We do have this interesting line here in Genesis chapter 37. When we're introduced to Joseph and the brothers, it says again that Israel loved Joseph the most, made him the tunic. And it says again about the dreams. And then it also says right here, it's right above it. Sorry, right above it. It says that this is actually the first part of it before we get to the code. Maybe a different author. It doesn't really matter. Here's what it says. Joseph, at 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. And Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father. So interestingly here, at least this version of the story of Joseph and his brothers was that the bad reports weren't even about all the brothers, that they were specifically about Bilhah and Zilpah's sons, meaning Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, that those four are the ones that he outs or humiliates or whatever. It doesn't have to be read that way, but it sometimes is, which is interesting because it basically, if you follow that line that Joseph is only bringing bad reports about them, then the reason that Shimon and Levi and the older sons, the ones of Leah that don't like him, they don't like him maybe because of the dreams, but it's not the tale-bearing issue. We don't know because it's not, the sentence is kind of a run-on sentence. It says he was tending the flocks with his brothers. And it says as a helper to the sons of the fathers of the father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. So are they saying that he's like that low on the totem pole that he's that he's helping out the concubine sons, or did he bring bad reports on all the sons? It can be read either way. I'm just telling you, in this, it seems as though in this midrash that we're reading, it seems that it's more about the sons of Zilpah that he's tail bearing. That's the problem. I don't know. I just want you to see it. There is something to hang it on in the Torah. That's not just a random. It's not just a random thing that they just made up. It says in the Torah. So now, how does God respond to this?
Now I confess my sin that ofttimes I longed to kill him, for I hated him from the bottom of my heart, and on account of his dreams I hated him still more, and I desired to destroy him from off the land of the living. But Judah sold him by stealth to the Ishmaelites. Thus the God of our fathers saved him out of our hands, and he did not permit us to commit an abominable outrage in Israel.
So there it basically says he was going to kill him. Judah saved him by not letting us kill him, but I would have killed him. I mean, that's what you just read.
Hear now, my children, the words of truth, that you may practice justice and the whole law of the Most High, and permit yourselves not to be tempted by the spirit of hatred. Evil is hatred, for it is the constant companion of deception. It always contradicts the truth. A little thing it magnifies into a great thing. Light it takes for darkness. The sweet it calls bitter, and it teaches slander, enkindles anger, brings on war and violence, and fills the heart with devilish poison. I tell you of my own experience, my children, that you may drive hatred out of your hearts and cleave to the love of the Lord. Righteousness banishes hatred, and humility kills it. For he that fears to give umbrage to the Lord desires not to do wrong even in his thoughts. This is what I recognized at the last, after I had done penance on account of Joseph. For true atonement, pleasing to God, enlightens the eyes, illumines the soul with knowledge, and creates a counsel of salvation. My penance came in consequence of a sickness of the liver that God inflicted upon me. Without the prayers of my father Jacob, my spirit would have departed from me, for through the organ wherewith man transgresses, he is punished. As my liver had felt no mercy for Joseph, unmerciful suffering was caused to me by my liver. My judgment lasted 11 months, as long as my enmity toward Joseph.
All right, so there we got a little bit more of our medical.
It's interesting that they know that the liver is connected to keeping you safe from poison.
Yeah, and again, it's that kind of that equation of physical
And they
body.
make a metaphor out of it.
Yeah.
Or we would see it as a metaphor. They probably didn't.
Well, no. I mean, this idea that hatred and envy is a poison.
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
So one of the things that, I mean, we're not sure. Yeah, like so we don't know if this was observed medical, practice that they understood the liver cleansed the body, that kind of thing. But what they did know about the liver, because they years and years of people dying and they did do I would say autopsies, but they looked at bodies. They saw that the liver weighs a lot compared to other organs, other parts of the body, that it has a disproportion, or like a seemingly heavier than it should weight to it, right? And so they thought that was kind of, and it wasn't just the Jews. I mean, it was the Egyptians, it was other Near Eastern cultures. I'm not sure about other cultures around the world, but they saw it as a part of the body that was heavier. And when they looked at things that weigh us down and kind of keep us from being good people or healthy people, hatred, or any of these kinds of emotions and feelings that are coming from a place of anger and here they say it's evil, flat out evil. They saw that as something that was not good, and it shouldn't be. It, and I'm thinking a lot about the Egyptian, where they weighed these organs, right? Where Anubis would weigh the organs, but they really looked at this as kind of like your body reflected your emotions, and the liver was where those emotions of things that would weigh us down, including hatred and envy and those kind of things, were kind of located. So it's interesting that they located it there. But as you said too, this idea of it being a poison is interesting as well. So yeah, I mean, he takes on responsibility for it. He says he's punished for it. And he tries. This is one of these farewells where it's not just, hey, try to do good things, do what I did. Try not to do what I did. And that's interesting that these deathbed confessions and final words also sometimes are, don't do this, which it's kind of I don't know that it's necessarily a modern answer. I don't know that people didn't do it before, but this idea that like everything that a person would say on their deathbed was, I lived a great life and you should be just like me. Here we have a very honest, reflection and saying, do better than I did. Don't hate people. So again, we don't know what God said on this. We don't know anything that God says in the entire Torah. He doesn't have a line, but he does in this, and it's pretty powerful. Here's how he finishes it.
And now, my children, each of you shall love his brother, and you shall uproot hatred from your hearts by loving one another in word and deed and the thoughts of the soul. For I spoke peaceably with Joseph in the presence of our father. But when I went out from before him, the spirit of hatred darkened my understanding and stirred up my soul to murder him. If you see one that has more good fortune than you, do not grieve, but pray for him, that his happiness may be perfect. And if one of the wicked even should grow rich in substance, like Esau, my father's brother, do not envy him. Wait for the end of the Lord. This also tell to your children, that they shall honor Judah and Levi, for from them the Lord will cause a savior to arise to Israel. For I know that in the end your children will fall off from God, and they will take part in all wickedness, malice, and corruptness before the Lord. After God had rested for a little while, he spoke again. My children, hearken unto your father and bury me with my fathers. Then he drew up his feet and slept in peace. After 5 years, his sons carried his remains to Hebron unto his fathers.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because it says that he was buried 5 years later back in Israel. He was reinterred, if you will. It's an interesting line about where he's buried. And again, there's other places that, according to Jewish tradition, that he is buried in Israel. But look, the tribe of Gad does not have a good history. The people who wrote this knew that. They knew that the tribe of Gad disappeared, and disappeared quick, because they were one of the tribes that was on the other side of the Jordan River. They were one of the tribes that asked Moses, let us stay on this side of the Jordan. We'll cross over. And, they eventually, I'd say, they agree to go over and fight with the rest of Israel, but they say, we want to come back on the other side of the Jordan and live there. And this is really nice pasture land. Let us have this land that they had taken from the Amorites, from the peoples that were living there. Not necessarily all the peoples that were living there, the Canaanite type people, the Ammonites and the Moabites who lived in that area. who lived in the around Gad, they may have not felt like the Gadites had a right to live there, but the Israelites definitely did. The Torah gives us the impression that they fought for it. They made a deal with Moses that they would go fight for the rest of the tribes and then come back, in that very famous section in Numbers. And it's interesting because we read about the tribe of Gad in the Moabite stone, the stele of the Mesha stele, they call it. It's in the Louvre. You can look at this amazing document that we found. The archaeologists, recovered, 70 years, 75 years, 100 years ago, almost. Yeah. The stone actually talks about the Israelites in it, but specifically mentions the Gadites, because they were the ones that lived near the Moabites and the Ammonites. They were the ones who lived on that side. And that the stone actually bears out the fact that the Gadites lived over there, and they had a reputation. The Gadites had a reputation for being tough guys, that they were tough warriors, that they were not people to be, trifled with, and they were ready to go into battle, anytime. Even though they were considered to be good warriors, I don't want to say soldiers, but more like, tough raiders or tough, to deal with, they do get exiled fast, and they disappear. So the writer of this recognizes that and says, you guys should listen to the other tribes and not mess around. But again, the writer knew what was going to happen to them. So that's Gad. It's fortunate, but maybe not so fortunate. Now, his full brother, Asher, there's a different situation here. The other son of Zilpah. Let's see what he has to say.
Asher's last words. In the 125th year of his life, while he was still robust in health, Asher summoned his children to him and admonished them to walk in the ways of virtue and the fear of God. He spoke, "Hearken, you sons of Asher, to your father, and I will show you all that is right before God. 2 ways has God put before the children of men, and 2 inclinations has he bestowed upon them, 2 kinds of actions and 2 aims. Therefore, all things are in twos, the one opposite to the other. But you, my children, shall not be double, pursuing both goodness and wickedness. You shall cling only to the ways of goodness, for the Lord takes delight in them, and men yearn after them. And flee from wickedness, for thus you will destroy the evil inclination. Heed well the commands of the Lord by following truth with a single mind. Observe the law of the Lord, and have not the same care for wicked things as for good things. Rather keep your eyes upon what is truly good, and guard it through all the commands of the Lord. The end of man, when he meets the messengers of God and of Satan, shows whether he was righteous or unrighteous in his life. If his soul goes out with agitation, she will be plagued by the evil spirit, whom she served with her lusts and her evil deeds. But if she departs tranquilly, the angel of peace will lead her to life eternal."
Yeah, so let's pause there for a second. It's an interesting, and again, this was written, or look, there's parts of it that could have been added by Christian writers. But it is also very possible that this was the hand of a Jewish writer who was starting to be influenced by these ideas of duality and kind of, this Gnostic dualism that we had. It came really from the Persians more than anything else, but then it had an effect on Christianity and effect on I guess you could say Western religion as a whole. But here this idea that when you die, your soul will kind of go in the direction that it's been living up until that time. And, you know, Asher is very clear that, you know, you can't have it both ways. You can't serve both. You got to make a choice. And, you know, do what's right. Don't, you know, live a good life. And if you do, then your soul is going to go to an eternal peace. So, I mean, here you pretty clearly get this idea that when you die, you know, it'll be better for you if you lived a good life. Now, again, it doesn't go into great detail here about that, but it does basically give you these choices. And again, here, the fact that Satan is literally likely raised to the level of, well, I wouldn't say Satan is, but his messengers are. It definitely gives, at the very least, a big role to Satan, which we don't have in the Bible at all. So, and really, again, not Satan, who is the one who is the prosecuting attorney, the devil's advocate, as we say, that kind of points out our flaws, but here, literally, like, you go one way or the other. So again, it's not as detailed as you have in other sources and other places, and even, again, Jewish sources that go into greater detail of heaven and hell, if you will. But this is there. I mean, it's again, we're not sure who wrote that part, but it is very possible there was a Jewish writer who wrote that. And again, I think it's Jewish. We can't say the whole thing is Jewish, but this concept of two inclinations, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov, the good and bad inclination, that's a very Jewish concept. It's a very rabbinic concept. The fact that it goes, you know, into these details as far as, I mean, nothing that we just read is contradictory at all to the theology that you get in the Talmud. Nothing. So that's why I would say, I mean, you could argue that it's written by a Christian writer or added to, embellished by, but it doesn't have to be. I don't know. I think it's pretty Jewish, or Jewish for that time. So let's finish up with what he says.
Be not like Sodom, my children, which recognize not the angels of the Lord, that you be not delivered into the hands of your enemies, and your land be cursed, and your sanctuary destroyed, and you be scattered to the four corners of the earth, and scorned in the confusion like stale water, until the Most High shall visit the earth and break the heads of the dragons in the waters. Tell this, my sons, to your children, that they be not disobedient toward God. For I read in the tablets of the heavens that you will be contumacious and act impiously toward him, in that you will have no care for the law of God, but you will heed human laws, and they are corrupted by reason of man's godlessness. Therefore you will be dispersed abroad like unto Gad and Dan, my brethren, and you will not know either your land or your tribe or your tongue. Nevertheless, the Lord will gather you in his faithfulness, for the sake of his gracious mercy and for the sake of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when he had made an end of saying these words, he commanded them to bury him in Hebron. And he sank into sweet sleep and died. His sons did as he had commanded, and they carried him up and buried him with his fathers.
Good vocabulary word there. Right? Contumations. It's a good word. Everybody gets to use contumacious today. As try to work that into your daily dialogue with someone today. Contumacious, it means stubborn, being stubborn or defiant. obviously. You can see it from the context there that, anyways, this is really not, I did anything wrong like his brother. It's, and as a matter of fact, don't be like my brother, God, and don't be like my half brother, Don, who, get completely dispersed. I mean, we don't have a tribe of Asher that we can point to and say they didn't wind up the same way. But there does seem to be this idea that like some of the brothers they must have been bad, and some of them maybe were okay. All these brothers lived a long time, right? Here it says, interestingly, that the beginning it says he's at good strength and he's strong, and I forget the language that they use here, that he was still in robust in health.
Quite healthy, but it was time for him to die, so he did.
Yeah. Well, you notice all these people also lived to be 125, which is interesting because we know and they knew that you weren't really supposed to live longer than 120. So how did these guys get like 5 bonus years? Well, look, Joseph only lives to be 110. He's the only one of the sons that we know how old he was when he died. The Torah at least doesn't tell us how old these guys are when they die. The implication here is that even though Joseph was younger, right? He was younger than everybody except for Benjamin, that he actually dies a little bit before them, but not a lot. And that like 125 years is like a little bit more than Moses, but not a lot. And so we know that Jacob lives, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob each live an average of like 170 years about. If you look at their averages, Isaac lives the longest at 180. I mean, none of these guys live that long, but they live longer than Moses. So it's kind of like in between, closer to Moses, but a little bit more because they have that closeness to Abraham and to Isaac and Jacob. So, the idea is that not 120, but pretty close. But again, here, like Moses, we just read Moses' death a couple of weeks ago, that he is robust and strong when he dies, that he's not infirmed and he's not lying, on his deathbed, but he's still vibrant up until the time that he dies. And that is, it's puzzling, because it's not the way a lot of people die today, and unfortunately, I don't know, I'll make a judgment about it, but after seeing it a few times lately, I in my family, I don't know. Actually, the funeral I'm doing today for May, she's 102, and up until a few weeks ago was still, I mean, she wasn't driving, but she was, and of course, like everybody else, she was under COVID restrictions, but it is she wasn't super ill. She wasn't dealing with like something that worn her down, and you just don't see that so much anymore, unfortunately. It's almost rare that somebody says, they were kind of robust till the end, but I guess then we puzzle at why the person died. It's almost like expected now that somebody is fighting illness or being ravaged by illness, if you will, until the very end. That's not the way, at least the rabbis viewed, and again, Jewish tradition viewed, that, what's nice is if you kind of go out and you're not suffering when you go out, and and not just leaving the world without suffering, but actually, as you just read with God's testimony, that your soul, even at that moment, leaves in peace. That final separation, if you're really good, if you lived a righteous life, then that separation isn't painful. So that is the end of Asher. And again, seems like a good guy based on that tradition. He's a good guy. So let's take a look at the last son who dies, but one who is actually the youngest son, right? So he too dies. And obviously, since he's the youngest, he's going to die last as far as chronologically. But let's read what happens with Benjamin.
Benjamin extols Joseph. Benjamin was 125 years old, and he called his children to come to him. When they appeared, he kissed them and spoke, "As Isaac was born unto Abraham in his old age, so I was born unto Jacob when he was stricken in years. Therefore I was called Benjamin, the son of days. My mother Rachel died at my birth, and Bilhah, her slave, suckled me. Rachel had no children for 12 years after bearing Joseph. Therefore she prayed to God and fasted 12 days, and she conceived and bore me. Our father loved Rachel fondly, and he had longed greatly to have 2 sons by her. When I came down to Egypt."
Hold on a second. So let's just talk about what Benjamin just said. So Benjamin, as we know, is the youngest of the 12 sons. We assume that he was much younger even than Joseph. Again, according to this, he was, says Rachel had no children for 12 years. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but that means, well, we just read, it's not a trivia contest, though that's a good segue. We're having trivia next month, November 15th, trivia night. There will be Bible trivia on that. So November 15th at 6 p.m. TVA trivia night. How old was Joseph when he was taken away, when his brothers sold him into slavery? Somebody. How old was Joseph? We just read it. And the Torah does say how old, well, I actually read it out of the Torah. He was 17. Joseph was 17 when he had the incident with his brothers. Right? So if you do the math,
Benjamin
how old was
was
Benjamin when that happened?
right.
This is a math question. He was 5.
It was 5, right?
Right?
Right.
So Joseph says that says here, at least according to this, and again, this isn't in the Torah, but according to this tradition that Benjamin was 5, was literally a 5-year-old child when Joseph is gone. It means that, the takeaway from that is that he didn't know his brother. He barely have any memories of his brother. If Joseph was gone when he was 5, he doesn't remember him. We don't know that that's the case, but it's possible, because we do know that it's not easy for Rachel to have kids. And so how long did she have to wait to have that next kid? And the child that Benjamin says it again, what Jacob says and what is such a powerful part of the Bible, she dies giving birth to him. It's a crushing loss to the family that she dies giving birth when this is all this woman wants to do is have a child. And she finally has that second child, which, to use the phrase, the heir and the spare kind of business, but there was this idea that, God forbid, if you have one kid and that one kid, something happens to him, like gets eaten by animals, wild animals, you have no kid. So Rachel really wanted to have a kid, a second child. It says, our father loved Rachel fondly, and he longed greatly to have 2 sons by her. All of the wives of Jacob have at least 2 sons, right? Leah has the most, because Leah has 6 sons and a daughter with Jacob. So she by far, again, it's a math problem. half the sons and more than half the kids, at least that we know of, the names, are Leah's. Leah's responsible for 50% of this corporation of Jacob and his sons. That's pretty big. But all the other wives all have two. So Rachel is remembered here in this story again. We didn't know this in the Torah, so this is another interesting tradition, that Bilhah nursed him. I mean, it's a fair question to ask. If his mother died in childbirth, who nursed him? Well, according to this, Bilhah nursed him. Which, of course, begs the question, how was
She could have
Bilhah's
had a daughter.
correct? So there would have had to have been a daughter later, or later child that would allow her to suckle, unless, again,
Unless she
Or it was a
suckled the
miracle.
entire time and was a milk nurse.
or she's just miraculous. It's a miraculous thing.
No, she keeps suckling.
The connection between Rachel and Bilhah, is such that, again, Bilhah, maybe miraculously was able to do that, to substitute. Look, there is a presumption in that too, which isn't just that she nursed him, but that she raised him. Here, of course, in the Midrash, or this version of the story of Bilhah, she isn't called a wife here. She's still called a slave.
Is she with Reuben at this point?
Not necessarily. Not yet. No. But the problem here is that the Bible doesn't really say who raised Benjamin. But it means that from the time he was 5, or maybe, or at least according to this tradition, from the time he was 5, he was living with a ghost, 2 ghosts, his mother and his brother. That's a tough life. It's a tough life. Look, we don't know what Benjamin was really like. What was Benjamin's life like? What was it like being now the youngest son? Did Jacob still give him, this extra attention? I mean, the Bible doesn't really tell us that. It also tells him that his name is Benjamin, the son of my right hand. Here, this Midrash says, don't read it as Benjamin, the son of my right hand. Read it as Benjamin, the son of my days, son of my years, which is, I'm old. I mean, these are all pretty heavy duty things that they're touching on here about Benjamin and who he was. Because we really don't know about him until he comes down to, not really. We don't know anything about his life until he comes down and is essentially held hostage. We don't know anything about him. We don't know what Benjamin's life was like in the shadow of these ghosts. Again, the brothers seem to say, hey, we want to protect him. That's a good thing. But we don't know what We don't. I mean, Benjamin really doesn't even talk to Joseph. Benjamin does everything that he is supposed to do, but we don't actually hear him say anything. The brothers speak to Joseph. The other brothers, the older brothers, speak to him. We don't hear Benjamin really say anything in the Torah. Actually, don't know that Benjamin has a line in the Torah. I don't think he does. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a line. So that's a little bit about his backstory, at least the way that some people imagined it was. So here's what says happened when he does go down to Egypt.
When I came down to Egypt and my brother Joseph recognized me, he asked me, "What said my brothers to my father regarding me?" And I told him that they had sent Jacob his coat stained with blood and said, "Know now whether this is your son's coat or not." And Joseph said, "This is what happened to me. Canaanitish merchantmen stole me away with violence, and on the way they wanted to hide my coat to make it seem as though a wild beast had met me and slain me. But he who was about to conceal it was torn by a lion, whereupon his companions, in great fear, sold me to the Ishmaelites. My brothers, you see, did not deceive my father with a lie. In this wise, Joseph tried to keep the deed of our brothers a secret from me. He also summoned my brothers and enjoined them not to make known to our father what they had done to him, and bade them repeat the tale he had told me."
So,
Now,
well, hold
so-
on one second.
Okay.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Benjamin doesn't actually, Benjamin in the Bible doesn't say anything. He talks to Benjamin, but Benjamin doesn't actually say anything. Benjamin cries on him, but Benjamin doesn't say that Benjamin says anything. But what's interesting about this version of the story, this midrash here, well, what did Benjamin say, and what happened with that conversation when they're reunited? According to this, and again, it's based on this idea, like, what did Benjamin know all along, and what do they tell him once Joseph reveals himself? And so, interestingly, according to this version, Joseph doesn't tell Benjamin the truth. Here, Joseph lies to him and tells him it was Canaanite merchants that did this, not your brothers. And it says that Benjamin knows this now, or Benjamin knows the real story. But it basically says that Joseph tried to keep this story secret from me. He didn't, and he lied to me, and he told the brothers to lie to me too, so that they wouldn't know. Now, you could say, well, that's because he wanted to protect. Joseph wanted to protect the brothers and not make them hated. But this midrash tells us that's actually done for another reason, which is that everybody lies so that Jacob doesn't know what really happened. Now, when we read the story in the Bible, we always assume that Jacob learned what happened. That people finally told Jacob what really happened. We don't know that. We don't know that Jacob ever learns the story of what really happened. It's a weird thing to think about, because our assumption's always been that the brothers, the story came out, or again, as we read in other places, that Jacob knew all along what was happening and wasn't happy with it, but had to kind of go along with it. But this is an amazing idea, that the family decided to keep this deception going, that Jacob shouldn't know what really happened. It's kind of a wild idea, and one that's really based on this idea of not upsetting Jacob and not wanting the truth to come out because it would destroy the family. So in this way, it's Benjamin that's kept in the dark to some extent, but also Jacob, at least until Jacob's, Jacob dies. It doesn't matter. Benjamin, at least according to this, does learn what really happened. That Jacob's, maybe after Jacob dies, they tell him what really happened. But this idea that Jacob is kept in the dark is a really interesting idea. It's not one that we really go with because we don't assume that everybody could have conspired to keep Jacob in the dark. But what if that was the case? What if Jacob doesn't want to know? Anyways, we don't have definitive line in the Torah that says Jacob ever hears what really happened. I mean, actually, I'm going to show you just because I think it's probably, you're probably going to say, nah, I'm going to show you. It says in chapter 46, they told him, the brothers tell him, Joseph is still alive. He is ruler over the whole land of Egypt. His heart went numb, for he did not believe them. But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father revived. Enough, said Israel. My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die. And maybe he didn't care. I mean, one of the things you can take away from this is that Jacob goes, I don't care. My son's alive. I got to go see him. I don't care why. I'm going to go see him. I mean, my son Joseph's alive. That's what he says. It's essentially, it's all I care about. It's an interesting idea. It's one that, again, you wouldn't necessarily go to because nowadays normally we overshare.
Yes.
We tell our parents things that they don't want to hear. But maybe in those days, people had a different sense of what you tell your parents. And maybe parents were kept in the dark a little bit more than they are today.
I haven't seen this, but there's like a movie about this family in China where the grandmother's dying, and everyone wants to see her, but they don't want her to know she's dying. It's the same kind of thing, really.
Interesting. Yeah, I think in other cultures, this might resonate in a different way. For us, it's almost like, I know that when I first kind of read
soap opera-y to me.
Yeah. Well, when I
Where
first
you have an artificial reason why people have to be kept into the dark just to create drama.
Yeah, but that's not at play here because this was written a long time ago. It really is this interesting idea that
The Farewell, it's called.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Have you seen it? Something for me to
I think I saw it.
Looks great though. Looks good.
I don't know if it was from Taiwan or from China, but wait, this is an interesting idea that, again,
China.
we don't share things always just because we can.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to tell everybody every detail of what happened. Now, again, I don't want to make this example because this is a pretty sick thing that happened, and for the family to not discuss it and to come to terms with it seems pretty. That's a hard.
If it happened in real life, it would probably poison the whole relationship.
Yeah, it's hard to sweep that one under the rug.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, yes, we sold our brother into slavery, but we're not telling anybody.
But here's the weird thing: the brother goes along with this.
Yes.
Continued deception and not telling the father. So it obviously it speaks very highly about Joseph's forgiveness and his willingness to protect his brothers, that he won't even He won't even destroy them. And again, I mean, the assumption here is that, I mean, it's kind of based on this concept, which is that how could Jacob, it doesn't seem like Jacob ever comes to terms with this with the sons. I mean, his comment, I don't care. I'm paraphrasing. I don't care. I just want to see my son. We never have Jacob saying to the sons, hey, you almost killed your brother, my favorite son, if you will. I mean, he doesn't even have to say that again, but you almost killed Joseph and you hid him from me for all these years. You didn't tell me that I thought he was dead. There never is that conversation that Jacob has. So for the rabbis or for anybody to interpret this as Jacob doesn't really know what happened with that, or doesn't know the brother's role in this, it's possible. And it allows for that conversation that we don't have to not be problematic because he didn't know. So he never has to hold the brothers accountable for it because maybe he didn't know. So that's just, again, it's based on that kind of absence of it in the Bible. So it's weird, but I've heard a weirder that really was like, in my, like stories that I've heard about families. So, it's possible. I mean, I discovered I had an aunt that I didn't know until 2 years ago. So things are weird, there are stories that you don't, I'm not surprised by any of these stories anymore. And so I would say it is possible that that the story, Jacob never gets the whole story. Anyways, that's an interesting thing that just got thrown out there in this version of Benjamin's life, if you will. But Benjamin knows the story. I mean, that's the thing. They kept it from me, but I know it anyways. I did know the story. All right.
Now, my children, love the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, and observe his commandments, taking that good and pious man Joseph as your model. Until the day of his death, he would not have divulged what his brothers had done to him. And although God revealed their action to Jacob, he continued to deny it. Only after many efforts, when Jacob adjured him to confess the truth, he was induced to speak out. Even then, he besought our father Jacob to pray for our brothers, that God account not the evil that they had done to him as a sin. And Jacob exclaimed, "Oh, my good child Joseph, you have shown yourself more merciful than I was."
Yeah. And so there you have this possibility that Jacob did finally, maybe he came to terms with it. He knew it, finally confronted it, and maybe again gave Joseph even more credit for being merciful. So it's a possibility too.
My children, have you observed the mercy of the good man? Imitate it with pure intention, that you too may wear crowns of glory. A good man has not an envious eye. He has mercy with all, even with sinners, though their evil designs be directed against him. And by his good deeds, he conquers the evil, since it was ordained of God. If you do good, the unclean spirits will depart from you, and even the wild beasts will stand in fear of you. The inclination of a good man lies not in the power of the tempter's spirit, Beliar, for the angel of peace guides his soul. Flee before the malice of Beliar, whose sword is drawn to slay all that pay him obedience, and his sword is the mother of 7 evils: bloodshed, corruptness, error, captivity, hunger, panic, and devastation. Therefore, God surrendered Cain to 7 punishments. Once in 100 years, the Lord brought a castigation upon him. His afflictions began when he was 200 years old, and in his 900th year, he was destroyed by the deluge for having slain his righteous brother Abel. And those who are like Cain will be chastised forever with the same punishments as his.
All right. Well, this was really very fortuitous. We read this very strange midrash about these are Benjamin's words. But according to what Benjamin just said, you got to learn from the people who came before. And it's going to go into the next paragraph too. But what's interesting is we just read this in last week's Torah portion, Genesis, and also in this week's portion, Noah. So in last week we read about Cain, right? And the fact that Cain gets this strange mark, right? So that people don't take vengeance on him. Now it's weird because why would God not want people to take vengeance on Cain? It would seem like an eye for an eye, that kind of makes sense. But it's almost as if God is saying at the beginning, there's no place for death and murder in my world, and even capital punishment. I don't want you to do it, which is, it's a possibility. I mean, it's a possibility that our ancestors felt that any type of death, including punishment death, wasn't what we're supposed to be doing. God, on the other hand, can do that. And so God, according to this midrash that we just read, punished Cain every 100 years. He would go through this, he'd go through these, basically like a hell on earth. And that he would go through these, they call them castigations, but they're punishments. They're his accounting, if you will. So God makes him pay every 100 years because he lives like he lives like 900 years, right? Which all the ancient antediluvian patriarchs do. Obviously, Methuselah is the longest at 969 years, but Adam and Eve gets 930 years. By the way, we never read that Eve dies. I just want to point that out for the viewers of Lucifer. We don't actually read that Eve dies. So the possibility that she doesn't die it's a possibility. God says Adam's going to die. It doesn't say Eve's going to die. The assumption is that everybody who's a descendant of Adam and Eve dies. But what if Eve doesn't die?
Then we lose Mark Twain's epitaph, and I'm not willing to give that up.
Yeah, but I like a midrash that Eve doesn't die, but it allows for a whole lot of fun that we can have imagining what Eve, the
What
mother,
Eve is still up to.
what Eve thinks about us, the mother
Yes.
who doesn't die.
Boy! That's what she'd say.
She's the eternal mother.
Eternal Jewish mother.
Yep. Mother of everybody. Yes, and the Jewish mother who has to deal with all of her children. But it's an interesting thing to develop. And again, it is like I said, it was in the Lucifer series that Eve doesn't die. But this idea that that Cain doesn't die until the flood is an interesting one, because it doesn't say that Cain survived the flood. So, I mean, Cain could have died even before, but this idea that Cain is washed away finally is almost as if to say that Cain is finally kind of like the final straw, or the final cleansing of Cain's murder is the flood. Like the flood is a delayed response, or not delayed, but it's like the final step. And what is it? It's bloodshed, corruptness, error, captivity, hunger, panic, and the last one being devastation, the flood. That was Cain's last punishment, which was a punishment that wasn't just for him, but for the whole world. That's an interesting midrash there, which is that the flood well, let's just use the positive. It was connected to Cain. It was a punishment that God brought against the whole world because of Cain. And because, again, assumedly, all the descendants of Cain were not behaving well. And actually, most of the descendants of Seth are not behaving well, with the exception of Noah and his family. So this is an interesting explanation for why the flood happened. And we're reading about the flood this week. So it's perfect timing to look at this Midrash. Again, we also have this Beliar, this other name for the dark forces. And seems to have a lot of power, and you have to be aware of him, and he is going to tempt you, but don't be somebody that's susceptible to Beliar, which again comes from the root Belial, which is like without God, or without the light. This is the source of evil and destruction, and even those that worship him are destroyed by him, right? So even those who think that they can somehow serve him, it says his sword is drawn to slay all that pay him obedience. I mean, this is the powers of darkness, that even those that engage in it are, if they think that they're somehow going to be spared, no, they're the one, they get destroyed right away. So this is a weird, kind of like back to the beginning, and it continues in this paragraph too.
Know now, my children, that I am about to die. Practice truth and righteousness, and observe the law of the Lord and also his commandments. This I bequeath to you as your sole heritage, and you shall leave it to your children as an eternal possession. Thus Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did. They transmitted it to us, saying, observe the commands of God until the Lord shall reveal his salvation in the sight of all the heathen. Then you will see Enoch, Noah, Shem, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob rise up with rejoicing to new life at the right hand of God. And we brothers, the sons of Jacob, will also arise, each of us at the head of his tribe, and we will pay homage to the King of the heavens.
Let's look at that right now, because this is another interesting throwback to earlier parts of Genesis. Specifically, to hear that Enoch, Henoch, Noah, and Shem are included in the list of patriarchs who are righteous. Notice that Adam is not on that list. There's only 6 patriarchs that are listed there. And obviously 7 is kind of the perfect number, right? It's the seal, if you will, right? So you'd think, well, if you wanted 7, you'd have Adam, Enoch, Noah, Shem, and then the 3 patriarchs. That would be 7. That kind of makes sense. And we have versions of things that have those as the patriarchs before Moses. Moses is not being included in this list. Like when we have the 7 guests at Sukkot, we just had Sukkot. We had the 7 Ushpizim, and of the men, Enoch, Noah, and Shem aren't on that list. They're not. The people that are on the list are all Jews. We add to the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's actually different lists, but we usually add Moses and Aaron and Joseph and King David are also on that list of guests that we have. but not the not the pre-Jewish ones, Enoch, Noah, and Shem. But they're all mentioned in the Bible as being, well, not so much Shem, but because he's the ancestor of the Semites, and because, again, throughout rabbinic tradition, he's a really holy guy, a special guy. He's preserving that he's the preserver of the knowledge, that it's not surprising that he's listed here in that chain. But there is no seventh here. Interestingly, all the sons of Jacob are like the seventh, because it says all of those six, and that we, the brothers, the sons of Jacob, will rise also at the head of each tribe. So the seventh spot is filled by all of them, all 12 sons, and they will again be that last step, if you will. Again, it's very similar to Christian kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily revelations, but it's definitely this final, who comes out at the end of the story, and it's the patriarchs and the people who have this relationship with God from before. They're the ones who we see at the end of the story. It's the Yoda, Obi-Wan, and even
Right.
there at the end, Anakin Skywalker. It's those people that now come out at the end and tell you that you did right and everything is okay. And so Benjamin tells his family that if you do the right thing, you're going to be okay. You and your children and the generations will be fine. But yeah, it sounds a little apocalyptic. It sounds a little bit what we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls and Revelations. I mean, it says, he shall reveal his salvation in the sight of all the heathen. I mean, it's pretty, that's pretty much, we're going to get to a time when there's going to be an accounting again, like there was at the beginning with the flood. There's going to be another accounting and another destruction or devastation that we'll get to. So again, said there's seven patriarch or seven people. There's seven. This is usually also the seven destructive things that we read about. And again, maybe we have to go through, again, it's part of the book of Revelation, 7 seals, that you go through these steps, and that there are good things that are obviously all 7, but sometimes the bad things run out in sevens, in a 7 as well. All right, so let's read what happens when Benjamin says goodbye.
After Benjamin had made an end of speaking thus, he said, I command you, my children, to carry my bones up out of Egypt and bury me near my fathers. And when he had made an end of saying these things, he fell asleep at a good old age, and they put his body into a coffin. And in the 91st year of their sojourning in Egypt, his sons and the sons of his brothers brought up the bones of their father in secret and buried them in Hebron at the feet of their fathers. Then they returned from the land of Canaan, and they dwelt in Egypt until the day of the exodus from the land.
So that's an interesting end, because assumedly Benjamin is the last son, the last of the brothers who dies, and now there's a waiting period until they all leave. So of course, what's interesting about this is that, or there's a lot interesting about what we just read. First of all, that he's buried in Hebron too, it says, Hebron, but also that they buried him in secret. They left in secret.
Kind of begs the question, if they could secretly leave Egypt, why did they have to have an exodus at all?
They just opened that. Right? So assumedly they have many more years that they have to go through. They have to wait until this redemption. But there is this kind of understanding that like they got to go back. They got to play this out. That they knew that they had to play it out. And so it says they dwelt in Egypt until the day of the Exodus from the land. So it's almost like they sat there and waited for their redemption. But yeah, they could have. I mean, they basically opened it up by saying that they went and buried him. Well, then why didn't they stay? Why didn't they stay in the land of the kingdom? So again, there's this understanding because remember, Abraham is told that they're going to be slaves. That it's like it's a foregone conclusion. It's destiny. It's the fate of the Jewish people that they have to go through the Exodus. So we're going to wait it out. We're going to go through it, and then we're going to experience it. I mean, it's a really weird theology, but it's ingrained on it. It's in the Torah itself. So the fact that people would say something like this isn't really surprising. The question really is, how do they make the rest of the narrative conform to that reality? That they seem to know that this is bound to happen, that this has to happen. I don't know. I mean, it's disturbing because it basically says that it's fated and it's had to happen, which kind of, we don't like that so much. But you just read it and people believed it. An interesting question, I think, that we have to ask ourselves is, if this is acceptable Jewish theology, will we get, or have we not already gotten to the point that people read other parts of Jewish history the same way? And I'm specifically talking about the Holocaust. If we get to a point where people say the Holocaust had to happen because that's the way God had it planned out, then that becomes part of the way that people explain the unexplainable to some extent. Well, I don't want to say it's unexplainable, but there's definitely, I have a lot of hesitation to say that I don't accept it, but we do see more and more people saying, oh, we had to have the Holocaust. It had to play out that way. So you can understand why, because this Midrash, this explanation, these explanations are very, very old. And again, to some extent, it's in the Torah. It's there. And so the fact that they accept it, I mean, the rabbis are going to accept it, but they're going to make their stories conform with this idea that it was destiny for them to have to be slaves. And so they've got to go back and wait. So according to this, Benjamin, I mean, they're in Egypt for 90 years by the time Benjamin dies, which would put Benjamin at about 30 years old when he went down there, and then he dies, at about 120 or so. And so he was there he went there when he was like 30, which, I mean, I don't know which number they started with, but if we use the math, and Benjamin was 5 years old when Joseph is sold into slavery, and he's there for 20 years before they reconnect, he's about 25, 30 when they go down, when he goes down. So when he's reunited with Joseph. So he's a young guy when his brother is, when he's with his brother Joseph finally. And he lived a long time. He lived most of his adult life, a lot more of his life in Egypt than he did in Canaan. So yeah, again, assumedly, some of the brothers would have been gone for 30 years, 40 years by now. So, yeah. I mean, and even Joseph would have been dead for 30 years or so by the time he died. So this is some interesting kinds of reflections on the brothers, on Jacob's sons, Joseph's brothers, whatever you want to say. What kinds of lessons did they teach? What was their takeaways? Because we really don't know what they said. We know what their father says to them. We know what a few of them say to Joseph, but we don't know what most of them had to say. And here we have this imagination of what they did say, which again is primarily teaching their families to do better, to stay on the right path, learn from our mistakes, all those kinds of things. So next week, folks, we're going to conclude with that today. But next week, we're going to read about Job. And before you go, what are you talking about? Job, how does Job live now? Well, the point is, we don't know when Job lives. The Bible doesn't really set it up. But there is a Midrash right here, folks. And so this is a collection of Midrash about Job. Job was married to Dinah. Another possibility for what happened to Dinah was that she was married to Job, who, according to this tradition, is himself a descendant of Esau's grandson. So if Esau had kids much earlier than Jacob, then Dinah could, even though they're a generation off, could be that Dinah could have been married to Job. I don't know. We don't get that necessarily from the story of Job himself, but the story of Job doesn't give a lot of backstory about who Job was. So we have a lot of Midrash about who he was, where he came from, how he came into the story, why we have a Bible story about him. Is he Jewish? Is he not Jewish? I mean, the understanding is usually he's not Jewish, he's Gentile. It says right here, the most pious Gentile that ever lived. Let's read about Job next week. And as I said, if you want to read a little Job, if you want to get back into a refresher on Job's story, feel free to do that over the coming days. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And again, we want to wish everybody a good night tonight. Go Dodgers. I don't know. I just stay healthy, everybody.
You're going to be
stay healthy.
losing your reader for a few weeks. I'm scheduled for surgery.
Yes,
so.
Rosemary, we wish you good luck on your
Thank you.
surgery on Friday. I didn't know you were going to announce it to everybody, but we definitely, you've done that now. And so we will,
I did it.
we will tell you that we're praying for you to have a very speedy recovery, not even recovery, that even when they go in, that there's going to find very little that needs to be done. So keep Rosemary in your prayers this week on Friday. Friday, what time?
I don't know yet.
Just let us know yet. But think about it on Friday, everybody. Thank you, Rosemary, for reading, and may you get extra strength from being the reader, as you always do. Thanks, everybody. And again, Jeff Stein reading for the Dodgers from afar.
Yes, go Dodgers.
Happy birthday again. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.